There are a lot of Muslim independent councillors. Some people are concerned about that, right? They're saying, like, oh, this big group of people are now growing up, what kind of proposals they're going to come up with, and they perceive this to be a threat to Britain.
No faith would advocate for someone's murder first of all. As Muslims, we have got that united approach, and we are united. There's nothing bad about being united.
The MI5, the Internal Security Service, is got a watch list of 39,000 potential Islamist terrorists on their sort of surveillance watch list. So that represents 1 in 100 of the Muslim population in Britain.
They're going around and claiming to be proper Christians, and then at the same time, they are burning Islamic literature in their marches.
Are you worried for the Britain that your children are going to grow up in?
Akhmed Yakoob, thank you so much for speaking to us today. You have an absolutely fascinating career. You're a top solicitor out of Birmingham, been running a big firm for the best part of 10 years. You have over 200,000 followers on TikTok. You've been in politics. You stood as mayor in the West Midlands 2 years ago, coming a very respectable third. That enticed you to stand in the general election in a constituency in Birmingham, standing against Shabama Mahmood, current Home Secretary. You came a very respectable second to her with a third of the votes. And when you're not zooming around in your lovely yellow Lamborghini, you're kindly making time to talk to us. So thank you very much. My first question is, there's a big perception today, and I'd like your take on the question, is the justice and law system in Britain broken?
I wouldn't say it's broken. It's overworked, less staffed, and more needs to be put in there to make sure that it carries on that way. We have in the UK a judicial system whereby trials are decided, the verdicts of trials are decided by jury members. That's a beautiful system, excellent system, I would say. And because of backlog, now there's talks that any offences that attract a sentence of fewer than 3 years can be tried by a judge alone. And that would stop a lot of fair trials from happening. That's what my intake is. But it's not broken yet, it's headed that way.
So has that gone through Parliament, this move to take away juries for raise the bar?
It's not Parliament yet, but it will.
It is going through?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's very interesting. Now, you've represented some very interesting characters. You controversially were initially representing the guys involved in that Manchester airport scuffle in the back end of 2024. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, when I was initially representing the family and the people who were involved, it was purely on a pro bono basis, first of all, because of the mother. The mother was there and she saw what happened, and it was unfair on her, and it was awful for her to be pushed and shoved around. Now, I'm a son, and I would never want my mother in that situation or see my mother in that situation. So when I initially took the case on, I wanted to make this a national issue.
Okay.
I wanted everyone to be talking about this case, that the police have done wrong. And a few elements of that have been proven now, because there was a verdict reached by a jury member, by the jury members, and they have discontinued that particular case, the assault on the police officer. Of course, I will never, try to justify the actions that happened, but that particular incident where that young lad is soccer kicked in the face, I said it then, and I said it now again. It could have took his life.
You've made a big name for yourself representing some pretty hard cases. I was listening in preparing for this talk. I was listening to some of your other podcasts, and for example, you represented defending a guy who was charged with trafficking heroin, 220 kilograms stash, and he was acquitted. And he, though, you probably reckon you only got him acquitted because of a mistake made by the prosecution. So he was probably guilty if it wasn't for a prosecutor's mistake. So how do you feel about that?
No, it's not about fear. What my best interest is, my job is to act in the best interest of clients. And I don't know which particular case you are referring to.
I can't remember
Yeah.
how many cases there are with 220 kilograms of heroin. So
Yes.
maybe.
I've done loads of cases over the past 10 years, but if I don't know which case you're referring to, but if the prosecution have made a mistake, it's not my job to correct that mistake for them. It's their job to correct. They're bringing the case. If they can't bring a proper case, they don't deserve to be prosecuted. Let's be honest. And how many times do the prosecution bring forth cases where people have been innocent, but they bring forth cases and people have gone to prison? How do you think they feel? Nobody asks them how they feel.
Yeah, I know a guy, he's a retired county court judge, so got to a very, very senior level. And after a couple of Netflix documentaries I've watched about what seemed like miscarriage of justice and explaining it to him, he goes, well, justice is a market as well. So you would
It happens. It happens. And I follow the French philosopher Voltaire. His name is, it is better to risk saving a guilty man than to condemn an innocent one.
Very good. Can we turn a bit now to your political career? Can you tell us a bit about what you stood for, both as a mayor and doing so well in that, 20% of the vote, coming third 2 years ago? You then stood in the Birmingham Ladywood constituency against Shabana Mahmood, and as I said earlier, got third of the vote against her 42% of the vote in the July 24 general election. What policies did you stand on?
The policies like accountability. I'll give you one example. In the general election, I had two campaigns back and back, one after another. So it was a very busy period of my life. For someone who hasn't been involved in politics at all, I jumped right into the deep end because I wanted to teach these people a lesson. And that lesson was that you can't just take your votes for granted. People vote you, and you can't take them for granted. And I realized that no matter how many emails you write to them, how many times you try to contact them, whatever they about the streets does not matter as long as they have their seats. So when the seats get challenged, that's the only way to shake them up, to actually go and do some work. I'll give you an example. In my campaign, in the Ladywood ward itself, there's a group called Ladywood Unite, and they are basically against the regeneration program. You're probably not familiar with the geographical element of what I'm talking about, but it'll make sense. So Ladywood ward itself, there's a regeneration program that is intended to take place and start building by 2030. And this is started by, if I'm not mistaken, since 2020. And there's a group of over a couple of hundred people and that were opposing this. And those groups consist of residents and people who have been living there. So Shabana Mahmood, that MP, now have a Home Secretary, did not respond to those people for 10 years. And she only got a response. The people only got a response when I put my name next to the ballot paper. So these complaints, I exposed a lot of mismanagement in the council. I exposed a lot of neglect of voters, contempt of voters, entitlement of voters. I exposed all that. That was my key, basically, theory when I stepped into politics. First thing we need to do is expose what others haven't done and how they have been representing us for decades. And, we're just starting our political careers, or my own, I speak about. I'm just starting up, just 2 years into it. And it's only going to get stronger.
Ahmed, I want to ask, we traveled around the country last year. We did our documentary, Should Brits Come Home? And we spoke to people from all different colours and places in the country and, classes, everything. And everyone seems to be really annoyed at the so-called uni party, Tories and Labour. Really, really frustrated. And yet I don't see Labour or Tories doing very much about it. You just talked about that frustration, right? It feels like people are turning to more radical answers, to independent candidates such as yourself. I mean, your results are spectacular for someone who's never been in politics before. Looking for something more radical than the traditional parties can give them. Is that how you feel people are frustrated right now?
I mean, why do you say it's radical?
It's radical because it's not the traditional two parties we've been voting for the last 100 years. So it's not a comment about the political, not talking about any of the political parties themselves. Just they're obviously looking for something not the normal. These people are frustrated.
People are frustrated. People are fed up of the two-party system. And it clearly demonstrated my first election. I started off the independent movement across the UK. I was the first independent candidate to receive such a vote bank in such a short amount of time, and I did it at the back of getting all the communities united under that one banner, and that banner was boycotting mainstream political parties. That's exactly what was doing in the West Midlands. So I live in Aldridge. I don't know where you're from.
Suffolk, in my case.
Yeah.
Guy,
Okay.
Southeast corner of Surrey, yeah.
Okay, so I live in a place just on the outskirts of Birmingham. It's like a countryside area, rural area, and I received support from here. Worcester Borough, I received almost 10,000 votes from here. So I managed to connect people of all faiths, people of all communities, on the banner, under the banner of, boycotting these parties. It was not known before this. Nobody ever did it before this. No, you would get one independent standing in a certain constituency, a certain ward, and probably winning. You didn't get people who started a whole movement, and that's what we managed to do, and that showed in the local elections as well.
So, Ahmed, we had the local elections, as you mentioned. There are a lot of Muslim independent councillors. Some people are concerned about that, right? They're saying, like, oh, this big group of people, they're now growing up. What kind of proposals are they going to come up with? And they perceive this to be a threat to Britain. I think I know what your view is on that, but what would you say to those people?
I think that's ridiculous, because you have the likes of Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage endorsing marches like the United Kingdom march, where you see the Shahada being burnt, flag of our faith, the Muslim faith, I belong to the Muslim faith, burnt public. You don't see the independents going around and targeting any religion or any faith. Yes, we'll cater to the Muslim voters, because certain demographics in the UK are mainly Muslim voters, but that does not mean that we single out the people who we've been dividing. We had candidates in Birmingham, lots as well of colleagues here right now, but they had colleagues of no faith, they had colleagues, they had candidates of the Christian faith, I had candidates, yeah, we had candidates of the Jewish faith, Christian faith, um, uh, and yeah, we know how to run our campaign. We have to appeal to voters. If ever we can appeal, I'm giving my example, appeal to the Muslim voters and the Muslim community, and also other voters and that can coexist. That's what my policy is. That's what our policy is of the independence, coexistence. Don't impose your philosophical views or religious views on anyone else, and don't allow anyone else to their religious, moral, philosophical views on us. That's our policy.
And listen, I agree with a lot of that, right? Like me personally. And it feels like somehow in...
Look,
So,
some far right media, I mean, I don't know if I could call them that, or I should say right leaning media, do have that narrative, and I don't know where they're getting it from. Like I just said, if you Google where I live, I just mentioned you, it's a majority, you know, if you want to call it that, white area where I actually live. But our candidates, where they live, for example, down the road, about 5 miles down the road in Alum Rock, their voters will be 90% Muslim voters. So here, if a candidate, for example, in Mosul down the road, which we did, we had white candidates in white areas and they've got good results. You have to look, that would be uh, a more divisive element if you go and say, no, we're only going to represent Muslims and stuff like that. But you've never ever hear anything like that from us or any of our candidates. It's what the media portray.
and I understand that, but for example, you know, we have these kind of touch point situations in the UK. And a good example is men who believe themselves to be women. Some people call them transitioning, identifying, various verbs. Most conservative Christians and Muslim people in the UK would say, I don't agree with that. You're made in God's image. We're people of the book. This is our religious belief. I certainly wouldn't agree, for example, with you teaching that to my children in any form. It's not something I want my kids to hear. So that then becomes this moment where you've got the rights of that individual to express their beliefs and then the rights of the other individual. And it feels like, I mean, the culture wars in the UK are hotting up, right? Like these subjects seem to be getting more tense, more angry. People are much more angry than they were about some of this stuff 15 years ago.
Look, of course, I mean, again, it goes down to not imposing each other's philosophical and religious views on each other. Now, if they believe one thing, that doesn't mean that our children should be taught that. We, of the people of the book, like you said, the Abrahamic faith, Jewish, Christian, Muslims, we believe that that is wrong. But that also doesn't mean that we don't allow people to live, and that also doesn't mean that we won't coexist. But age appropriateness is an issue. Children who are too young to learn about these things shouldn't be taught. For example, you can't legally go buy cigarettes or alcohol in the UK, I'm sure, when you're 18, or is it 16 now?
16 for cigarettes, 18 for alcohol.
16 and 18. So why are children being taught, and they are in some institutes, that it's okay to be, for example, change your gender, or it's okay to be homophobic. Sorry, it's not very okay to be homosexual. It is okay, but at a certain age, why is it okay? Why is the children not being stopped from buying cigarettes when they're 16 and alcohol when they're 18? And this is okay. This is, playing with their hormones. Let kids be kids. Let children be children. I've got 4 boys. They should be allowed to grow up without anyone, trying to naturally grow up without anyone trying to, say that this. They don't need to learn about that in school. College is a different story. After 16 is a different story. In schools, no. And I'll stick there. I'm a father of 4.
So, Ahmed, many of the commentariat in Britain would talk to this core British value of tolerance from the Enlightenment, going back to David Hume, who was religious skeptic himself.
And Guy's great-great-great-great-grandfather, by the way.
But actually, in spite of being a religious skeptic, David Hume actively propagated that we should be tolerant and respect
Of
other
course.
religious beliefs, and in general be tolerant. But then this reaches a limit where can we be tolerant of the intolerant? And we've got a stark, awful example of that, which came to court this week, this ghastly murder of Henry Nowak by a Sikh. And the question, and lots of people now shaking their heads, is why are only Sikhs in Britain allowed to carry knives just because it's their religious belief? And that surely is an example of where tolerance has gone too far.
Look, like I said, in terms of that's two different topics now, but in terms of tolerance with the people who want to, going back to the trans community, if they want to do something, they can, like I said, as long as they don't shove it down our throats, and no pun intended, our kids, there's age appropriateness involved with young children. And in terms of the Henry Nowak murder, I mean, I can't, it's very difficult to watch that clip when the police officers told him stabbed, and he says that, I don't think you've been stabbed.
It's brutal.
I can't watch it. I mean, I watched it once and I thought it was time to watch it again. I couldn't do it. And 18-year-old has lost his life.
That is utterly terrible, but we can come to that. The police response is a separate issue from the earlier point I was making about should we now outlaw Sikhs carrying knives?
Look, again, I've actually made a statement about this, and I said, right now it does feel like the whole Sikh faith is on trial, because I've seen it all over the media, social media. Everybody's going after the Sikhs, and I do feel sorry for them, because no faith would advocate for someone's murder first of all. No faith would say, go out and use. I mean, I'm talking about Sikh faith now. Go out and use the kirpan and kill someone. They just won't. And it's like if a Christian commits a crime and the whole Christian faith is to blame, was to take blame, you'd feel for them. And likewise, when a Muslim commits a crime, the media are quick to say that they're Muslim and all sorts. For example, the Manchester airport kills incident, a lot of people brought religion into it. In that case, that's why I actually have to take a back step and do whatever I do in the background. But religion is that's an issue that media have. It's an issue that that needs to be dealt with. Why is religion brought into everything when it comes down to Sikhs or Muslims? I see a rise in that. And that needs to be looked into more than anything, really. Yeah. This is an isolated incident of the Kirpan. In my 37 years of life, I haven't seen it happen before. And the prosecution case itself, you can check the court record if I'm mistaken. And then another knife was used, and he wasn't the Kirpan. But so look, I don't want to sound like someone wants to Sikh faith and try. It wasn't the faith, the fault of Sikhism in general at all. They're very peaceful people, and there are bad eggs in every community and every religion.
Let's turn now to the other point you raised about the police response. So for our listeners who are not familiar with this horrendous case, a Sikh stabbed a young British Pole in the streets of Southampton last year. This has all just come out in early June because of the court case. The Sikh stabbed this guy. He was bleeding to death in the street. The Sikh then called the police to say he was the victim of racial abuse by a white guy. The police came in with their sirens. They took the word of the Sikh for granted that he was right. They didn't accept that this guy was bleeding in the street, stabbed. They handcuffed him as he was dying. He said, "I can't breathe." And there's been utter uproar about this because, one, there are obviously similarities to the George Floyd case in America in summer 2020. I can't breathe. And secondly, well, in that case, we had the left screaming blue murder, taking the knee, including Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. This time, deafening silence. But the question which has come to the fore is this response from the police is a result of DEI being pushed in the institution of the police force and in the Law Society and across various institutions in Britain. Do you agree with that view, or is this a big exaggeration by the centre-right commentariat?
No, I think George Floyd incident was as awful as the one was Henry Nowak, and I certainly, I keep saying again and again that that video was a very hard watch, and the police are to blame partially, because if they had taken Henry Nowak seriously, that he's been arrested, he had been stabbed, sorry, they could have provided medical attention to him before, and they could have done their research and inquiries. In terms of Keir Starmer and anyone else, I can't really answer for them. I can only answer myself, and I said I'm father of an 18-year-old, so I wouldn't know. I can't even contemplate what the family must be going through. So,
Ahmed,
yeah.
how do we bring the UK back together again?
I mean, look, there has to be a united approach. I mean, the media has got a huge part to play in this, because propaganda is a big tool in anyone who wants to divide people. And they have been doing, for example, with myself, I'm seen as a divisive figure. I'm seen as someone who's not progressive, who's not inclusive. You're speaking to me now, and till someone has a proper chat with me, they don't want exactly what I'm like. And I'm not one to keep on going out there and trying to justify what I'm doing. I'm just not like that. I just carry on moving forward. So the media has a huge part to play. The media need to not be biased and show both sides of the story. So now, like I said earlier, it feels like the Sikh faith is on trial. Well, it shouldn't be like that. Okay, if you're unhappy with the Cape Band, mention the Cape Band, but then I'm seeing all sorts of disgusting comments about the Sikh faith now. So the media need to help in this unity. There needs to be more people who are center-based. Some people are just gone too far right. Some people are all the way down the left. And there's not many people that are sitting down and thinking, okay, that's wrong. You should be saying it's
Are
about
are,
trying to do people.
are you worried for the Britain that your children are going to grow up in?
Yes, look, with what's on the rise is a lot of far-right nonsense. You have people blaming religions. Someone makes a mistake. That mistake should be, bound to the perpetrator, to the criminal, not to a religion, unless he specifically, mentions that religion. Islam, for example, has been targeted for decades now, centuries now, I could even say. Now it's got to be more open. The rape that took place in Warsaw, not far from where I live, where perpetrator was a white man and he raped a Sikh woman, but he thought that Sikh woman was a Muslim woman, and he was saying it whilst raping her, all sorts of dirty things about Islam and stuff. So Islam has been targeted. But the thing is, are we going to just get up and go? No. People like me have to stay here to make sure we can try and make this a safer environment.
Your parents moved back to Pakistan, right? I'm just wondering, do your parents in Pakistan look at what's going on in the UK and go, Ahmed, maybe you should think about coming over here because it looks crazy?
Yeah, I'll have to be honest with you. They do. They're here now. They're coming a short holiday. We're going to go back. So, yeah, they do. I mean, it's not the same. It's not the same. But then if you look at where I live, I mean, I go out in the streets, I'm liked by people, whether they're white, Asian, Christian, Jews, everyone likes me, and I'm okay. But I'm saying it's headed that way, that people are not liking each other, and it's the political parties mainly that are trying to put people up against each other. The public on the ground, they actually are okay.
Can I just explore, Ahmed, the notion where you say Islam is being unfairly targeted, singled out, and just put down, I'm an economist by background, I'm in business, so I try always to look at facts and not, feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
So, facts. There are today in Britain about 4 million Muslims living in Britain. There are
Okay.
today in Britain, according to you can just go and Google it and pull it off
Yeah.
immediately, the MI5, the Internal Security Service, is got a watch list of 39,000 potential Islamist terrorists on their sort of surveillance watch list. So that represents 1%, 1 in 100 of the Muslim population in Britain is considered a potential threat to be followed. Out of a total of about 44,000 people on the MI5 list of people they have to keep an eye on. So the overwhelming vast majority of people on that watch list are Muslim. Global surveys of Muslims suggest about 1 in 10 to 1 in 8 take the view of the sort of violent interpretation of the Quran towards non-Muslims. That statistic goes up to as much as 1 in 4 in certain parts of the world where there's more war going on. So the charge, and so this is nothing to do with party politics. This is just looking at the hard data. And so I'd like to understand where you're coming from to say, oh, we're being unfairly singled out. Of course, the vast majority of Muslims are normal, good people. However, as a percentage of the Muslim population, the percentage of people who are prone to a violent approach against non-Muslims is categorically much, much higher than other groups.
Look, well, Muslims are being persecuted all over the world. You saw it, I think, about less than 2 decades ago in Kosovo, in Bosnia, when the genocide took place, when the Christian Serbs, were going around killing the Muslims for simply being Muslims. You have in Gaza a genocide taking place right now where these young children are dying simply for living in that land. Why? Why are they being targeted? Because other people want to come and take their land, which wasn't historically theirs. And the thing is, in terms of you said about the MI5, you have to check the criteria of how people get onto the MI5 list or the watch list of the terrorists. Look at the criteria, and being Muslims is a very easier way to get onto the watch list. So already, where the playing field is not level when it comes to stuff like that. How many convictions are there? You need to check this. What was the evidence when the case actually went to court? So again, bad apples are everywhere in society. A faith should not be targeted.
I mean, Ahmed, I'm just wondering whether if people are thinking about this, it's because with Christians, we're all people of the book, right? I've read bits of the Quran, so I feel like I know it better than most people because most people have never, most non-Muslims don't read the Quran. But most Christians don't have a kind of religious allegiance in the same way as Muslims do to each other. Obviously Catholics are very close to Rome, but it's not like it's some sort of political center in the same way that the Muslim faith is so international, it's so global, right? So it's a brotherhood in some respects. Christianity's kind of gone beyond that. And I'm just wondering whether there's a perception, you can tell me if you think this is wrong, that you can be a British Muslim, but your faith is so important to you that it's even more important, I guess, than your citizenship. That's probably what I'm trying to say, in a way that it wouldn't be for someone who was a Christian Briton. Is that right?
No, you could talk for some people, but The thing is, as Muslims, we have got that united approach and we are united. There's nothing bad about being united. Me, as a family, I have five brothers, I have four sisters, and we're all united. And you go down the road, you'll see a friend of mine. He probably lives in the same house with two of his brothers. There is a united approach when it comes to Islam because as Muslims, we are designed to help each other out. But that's not a bad thing, being united. It's a good thing out. It's a good thing.
I was going to say, I mean, I think is the point I was trying to explore was whether people believe that, obviously your allegiance to God is most important, your faithfulness and loyalty to God.
Well,
But when,
look, I strongly believe that we wouldn't be in this world, never mind in this country, if it wasn't for God. But part of our religion, importance of our religion is to be righteous and to be faithful to our country. That's why you have had in the Second World War Muslim soldiers who fought for the United Kingdom, who fought for the European forces. So yeah, I mean it's the same
so
as
Ahmed,
a
like the UK is a fairly non-religious country. Most formerly Christian people are people who are white British, for example, who may have had grandparents who were Christian and attended church regularly. They never go anywhere near a church. I mean, church attendance slightly gone up a little bit. First of all, I want to ask, does it kind of make you sad when you look at that, or maybe you don't think about it at all?
Of course, look, I'll be honest with you. When I see churches empty on a Sunday, that makes me feel sad. I hear church bells going, and about 10 people are walking in. And we have to be honest there. The more church-going Christians are the ones that are the actual immigrants that are coming over from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and some even from Nigeria. There's a church down the road, Nigerian church, that's actually half full on a Sunday. I go around all night because during my campaigns, I've actually traveled around everywhere, churches, mosques, see people of all faith. And I've seen that the majority of the churches that are half full are people from a non-white background, non-Caucasian background.
So, because I mean, I'm thinking like an extension of that is,
Sorry to cut you. And I would love for Britain to be a Christian country, which it was hundreds of years ago. I mean, 100 years ago. Now it's not, and that's why some parties politically are aligned with them. For example, the Green Party, they want to disestablish the Church of England and stuff like that. I personally don't. I felt offended with that because I believe that the Christian faith is a beautiful faith and a peaceful faith, and if properly acted upon, there's no degeneracy, there's no lying, there's no deceiving. It's a proper faith.
so I'm wondering whether if, because you've been saying, you feel that Muslims people don't think well of them, they don't understand them, they perceive them maybe, in this way negatively, and it's not justified. I'm wondering whether it's maybe just a problem because the people who are criticizing Islam just don't have a frame of reference when it comes to religion. It's because they're not Christian themselves or Sikh or Muslim, whatever country they just don't really have values anymore based on any kind of religious foundation. And
Yeah.
that's why they have a problem with Islam.
They're going around and claiming to be proper Christians, and then at the same time they are burning Islamic literature in their marches. Christianity will not promote the burning of any other faith's literature, so they're not acting upon their own Christian values. And who am I to start lecturing people about religion? But if people acted based on their Christian values, then they wouldn't be going around and marching on the streets against Muslims. It doesn't work like that way. And that's the wrong approach. That's the division approach.
So as you've been saying, Ahmed, as you've been saying, there's this huge tension. It feels a bit like a pressure cooker in Britain. So when me and Paddy were going around, as he already mentioned, around all sorts of parts of Britain and interviewing various academics and so on, we could really feel it. And one of the most interesting and terrifying conversations we had was with David Betts, who is the Professor of War Studies at King's College London. And he's made a bit of a name for himself by articulating beautifully and terrifyingly that Britain is on a path, an irretrievable path towards civil war. He says all the literature on civil war shows that Britain ticks all the boxes down this path. And unprompted, on some of the, when we're just meeting people on the street, we're at Notting Hill Carnival, for example, I met a lovely chap, Jamaican origin, British Jamaican guy, and he said, we're on a path to civil war. And then you say, well, who's fighting who? And the answer was Muslims versus non-Muslims.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of narrative some people are pushing. And if the narrative keeps getting pushed, then unfortunately we probably are going to go down that route. But it's ridiculous, really. Um, Everyone should be able to coexist. And even if you can't love one another, that everyone should be able to respect everyone's religious and moral and philosophical views. And look, you mentioned something about putting faith before anything. Our faith is the one that allows us to be the way we are. We want to go out, meet people. We want to make a change for the communities, what our political leaders haven't done for so long. And then you have the likes of people like, and I always put first, you have the likes of Matt Goodwin or Nigel Farage. He's asked the Israel first or England first. They can't answer that question. I can answer the question. I can say Israel, England first, always.
And yet, it's very easy, and everyone loves to criticize Nigel Farage and Matt Goodwin, who's obviously behind him, standing with him in the Reform Party. They have been consistently leading in the polls in Britain for a long time. They're polling between 26 and 32%. If there was a general election tomorrow, obviously that's a hypothetical, but if there was a general election tomorrow, the polls suggest that Reform would win the most seats. They wouldn't win an outright majority, so you need 325 seats, effectively 320 seats for an outright majority in Parliament in Britain. They would probably win around 230, 250 seats. The Conservatives would win somewhere probably tomorrow between 100 and 110 seats. So the most likely new government, if that situation doesn't change when there has to be a general election in 3 years, is Nigel Farage is the next Prime Minister in a coalition with the Conservatives. So we shouldn't just be dismissing that. Nigel Farage speaks for most of the voters who would vote in a general election tomorrow, if the polls are right.
Look, the polls said that I was nowhere near getting any sort of vote. The polls said that I would lose my deposit when I started campaigning. So we can't really trust polls like that. But look, even if it is true, let's see what happens. And we can't predict the future, can we? Let's see what happens.
Oh, sure. A week is a long time in politics, and 3 years is a near eternity.
In Birmingham, we've got a strong hold to independence, so I don't think Reform are winning anything in Birmingham.
Okay. Well, Ahmed, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. This has been an absolute whirlwind tour.
Thank you.